So the other thing now, what we're moving into the line where you not only you don't need your TI, it is not allowed to have a TI. Okay, so we're going to do the rest of this semester without the TI Inspire and without any calculator that has the word sine, cosine, or tangent on it. So you can just use the ghetto calculators from here on out. So what that means is I'm not going to be asking for the sine of 31.6 because that only can be done with a calculator. So I'm going to be asking you about the sine and the cosine of things that we're going to know. Okay, so there are two triangles. You study this in geometry. We just need to bring it back. That we need to really study. A 30, 60, 90 triangle. Why do we call it that? Those are the angles. So a right triangle that has a 30, a 60, and a 90, those add to 180. Another right triangle is one that we call a 45 degree. So the two angles are 45, that adds to 90, add that to the other 90 degree angle, and that's a 180. So these are very special right triangles. What I would do for now, let's skip this part right here, and let's just go to the drawing that's underneath it, okay? So underneath it, you will see this is what you really need to know. If I have a 30, 60, 90 angle, or triangle, the side that is opposite 30 degrees is always 1/2 of the hypotenuse. So what you're going to see is I'm going to have the hypotenuse being 1 in all my right triangles from here on out. And then here, so if the sine opposite 30 is 1/2, the other side is the square root of 3/2. If this is a 45 degree angle, these sides have to be equal. So if this side is 1, this is the square root of 2/2, and this is the square root of 2/2. You can verify all this with the Pythagorean theorem, but what you really need, you need to know these two triangles, okay? So they'll be on the test with blanks, but you need to be able to draw, if that angle is 30, then this is what this triangle looks like. The side that is opposite 30 is 1/2. The side that is opposite 60 is square root of 3/2. If this triangle is drawn the other way, you know, if this side is 30, then this side is 1/2, and this side is square root of 3/2. Okay, so you need to be able to just draw it. And the way I remember it, if it's the side that's opposite 30, is always 1/2 of the hypotenuse. Well, if my hypotenuse is 1, this is 1/2. The other number is square root of 3/2. With 45 degree, 45 and 90, it's always the two legs are equal, square root of 2/2. Okay, so we need to know these pieces of information to do everything we do in today's lesson. The other thing we need to make sure we know is all of the definitions of our sine, cosine, tangent, and the reciprocal functions. So remember, what was the acronym we had for this? Yeah, so the Indian princess Sokotoa, or whatever else you use to remember that, okay? So the sine is the opposite of our hypotenuse, cosine adjacent hypotenuse, tangent opposite adjacent. The cosecant is the reciprocal of the sine. In terms of opposite, it's going to be what? It's the hypotenuse divided by what? The opposite. The secant is the hypotenuse divided by what? The adjacent. And the cotangent is the adjacent over the opposite, okay? So we have to know all of this, okay? And this is what we started out with the trig function, knowing all of this. Now, the reason we're doing all this is I want to now be able to ask you about values of trig functions, okay? Let's figure out what the secant of 30 degrees is, okay? First thing I need to do is draw 30 degrees. Where is 30 degrees going to be? Which quadrant? When I draw it, where? The first quadrant, okay? So 30 degrees is going to look just like this, okay? This is 30. That's what a 30 degree angle is going to be. Now, the reason we're talking about these special right triangles, in order to do this, you need to make this a triangle, okay? So you need to put your right angle down on the x-axis, okay? Somebody's going to do this. Somebody's going to decide to do this, and this is wrong, okay? That's not it, okay? So don't ever do that. Forget that I did it. You want to draw a triangle with the closest x-axis. So you can see if I'm sitting right here, the closest x-axis is right here. This one is further away, okay? And I'm not talking about the y-axis. So draw a right triangle, forming it with the closest x-axis. So if that's 30, what's this angle up here? This angle is 60, okay? And then let's just do the hypotenuse is 1, okay? What is this side over here? Yeah, this side is 1/2, and then what is this side right here? Yeah, square root of 3/2, okay? Now, they asked me for the secant. The definition of the secant, so the secant of this angle, 30 degrees, So the secant of 30 degrees, it's the secant goes with which one? Cosine. If cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, what's secant? Yeah, it's hypotenuse over adjacent. Okay? So just look at your triangle. If I'm looking at 30 degrees, what's the hypotenuse? 1. What's the adjacent? Yeah, square root of 3 over 2. Instead of writing 1 over a fraction, how can I write that? If you had 1 over a over b, how can I write that? It's b over a. It's the reciprocal, okay? So 1 over the square root of 3 over 2 is just, that is 2 over the square root of 3. So that is the secant of 30 degrees. This is why you don't need your TI Inspire, because I didn't have to punch anything, and I didn't have to write it's 2.667 and round it off. This is the exact answer. So this is what we're going to be doing with these two triangles to figure out these kind of trig questions that I ask you. Okay. Now the other thing that comes into play here is that was in the first quadrant, but I need to go to the second quadrant, the third quadrant, and the fourth quadrant for all of these. So in quadrant 1, so this is quadrant 1 right here. Okay. If I'm starting here, what are my x and y values? The x values, are they positive or what over here? Yeah, x values are positive. What are the y values up here? They're positive. Okay. If I go to quadrant 2, I'm sitting over here. What are my x values? Negative or positive? Yeah, I'm traveling this way. My x values are negative, and what are my y values? They're positive, okay? If I go to quadrant 3, which is down here, I start traveling at the origin. My x values are traveling in what direction? Negative. My y values are traveling in what direction? Negative. If I'm in quadrant 4, my x values are traveling what? Positive, and my y values? Negative. So that's the other thing you're going to need to do with these special right triangles, is to know which your x and y's are positive and negatives. So let's do an example of that. Let's figure out the sine of 120 degrees. First thing you have to do is draw the angle. Where is 120 degrees going to end up? What quadrant? Quadrant 2. So a 120 degree angle is going to be something like this. So this is 120 degrees. Okay. Now what you need to do, you need to draw a right triangle with the closest x-axis. So that means I'm going to do what? I'm going to come straight down here. That's going to be my right triangle. Okay. This angle that you see here is called the reference angle or the central angle. You may hear that terminology. What is this angle right here? Not 30. Nope. Here's 120. What do you have to do for 120 to make it 180? It's what? 60. Am I not hearing 60? That angle is 60. Okay. If that angle is 60, what is this angle up top? This angle is 30. Okay. Now with these special right triangles, this side is always going to be 1. Okay. What is the side opposite 30 going to be? 1/2. What is the other side going to be? Square root of 3 over 2. Now you got to double check yourself. In this quadrant, if I started here, is this value a negative or positive, the x value? If I travel this way, x value is negative, y value is positive. So that's my triangle, okay? So it may throw you, what's a little bit different there is I got a negative value for x, but I need that in order to evaluate this. So to figure out what the sine of 120 is, I look at this triangle, and I look at this angle right here, which is the central angle. So what's the definition of sine? Opposite over hypotenuse. So what is the sine of 120 in that triangle? It's square root of 3 over 2 divided by 1, which is just square root of 3 over 2. That's the sine of 120. Now I did not ask it, but what is the cosine of 120? The cosine of 120, what's the definition of cosine? adjacent over hypotenuse, and that's going to be what? Negative 1/2 over 1, which is negative 1/2. The cosine is negative, okay? That's why these positive negatives make a difference here. So the sine of 120 is the square root of 3 over 2. The cosine of 120 is negative 1/2. So again, we're not using our calculator because you can reason through this, and I'm only going to be asking you about 30s and 60s and 45s, okay? I'm not going to ask you about 21 or 26, okay? So all of these are going to work the same way. You've got to be able to draw angles like we did before the break, and then draw a special right triangle, and then figure out the plus and minuses of your x's and y's. Find the value of the cosine of 315. First step is to draw the angle. So 315, if I go all the way around, what is that? What's a complete revolution? 360, okay, but I'm not going that far. I'm going 315 degrees. How far short am I stopping? How far short am I to 360? What? 45. If the angle ends in a 5, what kind of angle you think I'm like 315, 225? If it ends in a 5, it's going to be a what kind of triangle? It's going to be a 45, okay? So you know that because those are the only kinds of things I'm asking you. So how do I find where's the nearest x-axis? Go straight up here, okay? So if this is 315, what is this angle right here? Okay, that's 45, and then this has to be 45. With 45, 45, the hypotenuse is always going to be 1. It's always positive. And then what were the other two sides of a 45? Yeah, square root of 2 over 2, square root of 2 over 2, and then you got to ask yourself, positives and negative. Is this one positive or negative? This is positive, that's positive x, but this is what? Negative y. Now you draw the triangle, now you answer the question. The cosine of that angle. And so you're looking, here's my reference point. It's that reference or central angle. What's the definition of cosine? Adjacent over hypotenuse. So relative to this angle, where's my adjacent? What, square root of 3 over 2 over 1. So this is just square root of 3 over 2. Oh, back up. Sorry about that. Square root of 2 over 2. What if I had asked you for the sine of 315? What's the definition of sine? Opposite over hypotenuse. So what's the answer of this one going to be? Negative. So the sine is going to be opposite over hypotenuse, negative square root of 3 over 2. Okay. What would the tangent of 315 be? What's the definition of tangent? Opposite over adjacent. So what are those numbers going to be? Negative square root of 2 over 2 over square root of 2 over 2. What is that number? Negative 1. Okay. Tangent is negative 1. Okay. So that's all we're doing. I'm asking you about these trig functions based on these special right triangles. And this is the only two, these are the only two triangles you're going to have. Okay. So let's do a few examples. So for each angle, draw the angle, find the value of the central angle theta. That's the angle that I'm creating with that special right triangle. And then answer the question. Okay, so a 300-degree angle. So if I go all the way around, that's what? 360. So 300, instead of going all the way around, so if this is 300, how far short did I make it? Yeah, it's 60 degrees short of a complete revolution. So here's my special right triangle. If that's 60, what's this one down here? This one is 30. This side is always 1. Okay. What is this top value right here? Right here. This is 1/2. What the opposite 30 is always 1/2. This other one is square root of 3 over 2. Then check your pluses and minuses. Is this one a positive value? The y is negative. Okay. Now let's just go figure out. So the central angle is this angle right here. So that's 60 degrees. That's my reference angle or my 60 or my central angle. So what's the definition of sine? Yeah, opposite over hypotenuse. So what's the, looking at that triangle, what is the sine of that angle? Yeah, it's negative square root of 3 over 2 over 1, which is just negative square root of 3 over 2. What's the definition of cosine? It's adjacent over hypotenuse, which is 1/2 over 1, which is 1/2. So let's look at the next guy, 150. If this is 0, this is 180. Where would a 150 degree angle put me? Quadrant 2. Okay, so 150 degree angle. So if this is 150, if that's 150, then you draw a triangle with the nearest x-axis. What is the central angle here? What is this angle now? No. This one's 30 because it's 150 plus 30 to get me to 80. The top angle here is 60. Okay. So the hypotenuse is always what? 1. What is this angle over here, the y angle, the side here? What is this one? This is 1/2. The one that's opposite 30 is always 1/2. The other one is square root of 3 over 2. And then what are the positive, negative values? Yeah, this one is negative, the other one is positive. Okay. So to figure out the secant goes with what? Cosine. So the secant of this angle, alpha, that's going to be 1 over the cosine. Cosine is what? Adjacent over hypotenuse. So this is going to be hypotenuse over adjacent. So what's the value of the hypotenuse? 1. So this is 1 over, what's the value of the adjacent side? Negative root 3 over 2. So anytime you see 1 over that number, my final answer is just going to be the reciprocal. So negative 2 over root 3. What's the definition of cotangent? Yeah, so cotangent is adjacent over opposite. So that's going to be what? Here's my angle. What's the adjacent side? Yeah, so it's negative root 3 over 2 divided by what's the opposite side? 1/2. So think of this as negative root 3 over 2 times 2 over 1. When you divide by a fraction, that's the same as multiplying by its, starts with an R, reciprocal, okay? And then what does this simplify to? When you multiply those two things, what happens? Yeah, negative square root of 3 is your final answer there. So all of these are just, you're coming up with triangles that are either going to be a 30, a 60, or a 45. Those are the only choices here. Let's look at 210 degrees. So if this is 0, this is 180. Where will 210 put me? Quadrant 3. So that means this angle is going to be like right here. So that's 210 degrees. And then let's draw our triangle with the nearest x-axis. What is that reference or central angle? What is that angle right here going to be? Okay, so I went to 180. How much further did I have to go to get to 210? 30. Your answer is always going to be 30, 60, or 45. If that angle is 30, what is the angle down here at the bottom? That's 60. Hypotenuse is 1. So what is this side over here opposite 30? This side is 1/2. This side is square root of 3 over 2. What are the positive and negative signs that go on those guys? They're both negative because I traveled in a negative x direction and a negative y direction. So what's the definition of cosecant? It goes with which one? No, cosecant goes with sine. So this is going to be hypotenuse over what? Over the opposite. What's the value of the hypotenuse? It is always 1 in these problems. What's the opposite side of this guy? Negative 1/2. So 1 over negative 1/2, that's 1 times negative 2 over 1. Divided by 1/2 is multiplying by its reciprocal. What is his answer? Yeah, that is negative 2. The tangent. What's the definition of tangent? Yeah, opposite over adjacent. So the opposite side is what? Negative 1/2. So this is negative 1/2 divided by the adjacent side, which is negative root 3 over 2. So to simplify this, this is negative 1/2 times what? Yeah, negative 2 over root 3. Is this going to be a positive number or a negative number? Positive, it's 2 negatives. The 2's go away. This is just going to be 1 over root 3 is your answer there. (45°). Which quadrant does that leave me in? Yeah. Let's change this and make it a little bit harder. Let's make it negative 45°. Okay. What does that do? How do I draw a negative angle? I start here and I go this direction. So here is negative 45°. So in the triangle, though, what is this angle right here? Well, I mean, when I drew the angle, I went down here negative 45°. But when I go to my triangles, I'm wanting all positive angles. So what is this angle measure of this triangle? This is 45. What is this one? 45. This side is 1. What are the other two sides of a 45? Yeah, they're both square root of 2 over 2. This one is positive, and then the one you see here is negative. Okay. So what is the definition of sine is what? Yeah, so here's my angle. So the opposite side is what? Negative root 2 over 2. So this is going to be, so if I look at opposite over hypotenuse is going to be what? Negative root 2 over 2 divided by 1. What is that number? Yeah, it's just negative root 2 over 2. What's the definition of cosine? Adjacent over hypotenuse. So that's going to be root 2 over 2 over 1, which is just root 2 over 2. That's the cosine of that angle. 225. It ends in a 5. What kind of triangle am I going to end up drawing here? It's going to be a 45. You know that. So you just got to find the right quadrant for it. So if that's 0 and 180, where's that 225 going to put me? Here's where will I end up? Quadrant 3. So a 225-degree angle does this. And it means that this little angle here is what? In the triangle, it's a 45. Okay. So those are that's the only choice when the angle ends in a 5. So this side is 1. What are the two sides of a 45? Yeah, they're both square root of 2 over 2. And they're both negative in this case. Okay. What's the definition of tangent? Yeah, so opposite over adjacent in this case is going to be what? Negative root 2 over 2 over negative root 2 over 2. What is that number? Positive 1. So the tangent is 1. What's the definition of cotangent? Yeah, so it's adjacent over opposite. I'll get the same thing. So it's going to be negative root 2 over 2 over negative root 2 over 2, which is 1. The other way, the cotangent is 1 over the what? the reciprocal functions. The cotangent is 1 over the tangent. So if I knew the tangent was 1, what is 1 over 1? 1. So I expected this one to be 1. 300 degrees. Is this going to be a 45? No, it's either going to be a 30 or a 60. Which do you think it is? It's 60 because 300 is 60 away from 360. So if I draw this 300 degree angle, so here's 300, that means this angle has to be 60. This is my 30 degree down here. Hypotenuse is 1. What is the side up here on the x-axis? That's what? That's 1/2, and then this one is square root of 3 over 2. But what goes with this one? Yeah, there's a negative in front of that one. Secant is the reciprocal of what? Cosine. So if the cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, secant is what? Yeah, it's hypotenuse over adjacent. So that's going to be 1 over what? 1 over 1/2, which is 1 times 2 over 1, which is 2. You're also going to get the same answers here. You're going to see 1/2, negative 1/2. Square root of 3 over 2, negative square root of 3 over 2. You're going to see 2 and negative 2. 1 and negative 1. Square root of 3, negative square root. You're going to, there are only a certain number of answers you're going to get here. What's the definition of cosine? Yeah, so adjacent over hypotenuse. So looking at this angle right here, what's the adjacent? Yeah, so it's 1/2 over 1, which is 1/2. 405 degrees. I haven't drawn it, but what's it going to be? What kind of triangle? No, it ends in 5. It's going to have to be a 45. So if I start at 0, when I go all the way around, how far have I gone? That's 360. How much further do I need to go? 45 more. So this is my 405 degree angle, but the triangle that it makes is a 45-45. The hypotenuse is always what? 1? And what are these other two sides? Yeah, and they're both positive here. What's the definition of tangent? Opposite over adjacent. What is the opposite over adjacent here? Yeah, it's, I mean, you'll get used to this. It's square root of 2 over 2 over square root of 2 over 2. You can get to where you can do that one in your head. That's 1. Those things are the same. What's the definition of cosine? Adjacent over hypotenuse, and what's that going to be? Yeah, square root of 2 over 2. What's the sine going to be? Yeah, which is square root of 2 over 2 over 1. Same thing. Okay. So that is it for the lesson, I believe. So here's what we did. You need to know a 30, 60, 90, and a 45 triangle. Those are going to show up on your test. So if you look at the review, I think what shows up on your quiz, that it's going to show up just like this. And if you fill this in wrong, what do you think is going to happen on the rest of this quiz? Huh? You're going to make mistakes. If you don't know these two triangles, that's all we did today, knowing these two triangles. You've got to know these two triangles and then know how to use them and how to draw angles, okay? So the other thing is you need to be able to draw these triangles in all 4 quadrants, knowing which side is positive, which side is negative, and then using those triangles, be able to evaluate the 6 trig functions for 30, 45, and 60 degrees, okay? Okay, that's it. So